Daniel Ortega was sworn in a fourth consecutive term as president of Nicaragua this Monday. Brazil faces a housing crisis, but social movements and left-wing local authorities are working to address the deficit. And Russia told the United States that it had no plans to invade Ukraine, as the two sides held talks in the Swiss capital amid escalating tensions. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and we begin this news brief in Nicaragua, where the inauguration ceremony of President Daniel Ortega was held this Monday. Ortega secured a fourth consecutive term in office in the November 7th general elections, with more than 76% of the vote. The ruling Sandinista National Liberation Front also secured a landslide victory in November, increasing its parliamentary majority. The swearing-in ceremony this Monday took place in the Revolution Square, northwest of the capital, Managua. Delegations from at least 21 countries, including head of states and foreign ministers, attended. As part of the inauguration, President Daniel Ortega called on his ministers to work for the benefit of the Nicaraguan people.
From your hearts, all your energies, all the work that you can do to meet your functions in favor of the Nicaraguan families. If you do so, then the Nicaraguan families and peoples will recognize you. If not, if they themselves will demand you, then you are now given your positions of ministers, officials from the government of Nicaragua.
Making his inaugural speech, the Nicaraguan president denounced the attempts at foreign interference in the country's internal affairs.
There were no human rights trying to defend and to condemn that crime, because they were the same, the criminals. They haven't lost the essence of being imperialist, and they do not realize that the peoples are not afraid anymore, they are not fearless anymore, and they fight today with dignity.
President Daniel Ortega also called on the United States government to lift the sanctions on his own nation, as well as the blockades against Cuba and Venezuela.
Biden has a great opportunity right now to do a historical turn, a very brave turn, when we are not begging, we are asking for justice, and he could do reparations to the Nicaraguan people. To stop the blockade against our sister nation country of Cuba. He has elements and information to defend the lifting of the blockade, because more than 90% of the country that are members of the United Nations, every year we are voting for the lifting of the blockade. And if you respect democracy somehow, when the majority of the countries of the world are saying to lift the blockade, well, the U.S. government, if they really respect the international right, they should lift the blockade against Cuba. And they also should stop the blockade against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. A brutal and criminal blockade against this nation. They create false crimes, they persecute them simply because the government of Venezuela is trying to look to guarantee for the food of the Venezuelan families.
Nicaraguan Vice President Rosario Murillo offered statements following the inauguration ceremony, stressing that it was a historic day for the country.
It's a historical day. Every day we grow, but today we grew more because we know that this has been an exercise of national sovereignty and that the victories belong to the people, to the heroic people. The people that is the president of Nicaragua. Today is a day to reinitiate of all the programs and all the plans that we will carry out to keep peace, the rights of all citizens to live in peace, studying, and also all the programs that we have for health, all the faces that we see today of this young generation that is on the front of the line, of the eyes of these heroic sisters and brothers like Brenda. We feel that young generation that also gave everything for life, for health, for the rights of the Nicaraguan families to have rights, to live, studying, working, and advancing the world. Today is
And precisely on the day of President Daniel Ortega's inauguration, the United States announced new sanctions against 6 Nicaraguan officials based on Trump's top accusations of state acts of violence, disinformation, and targeting of independent media. The U.S. Treasury sanctions targeted the Minister of Defense, as well as officials of the military, the company overseeing telecommunications and postal services, and the state-owned Nicaraguan mining company. Now we move on to other topics. Brazil faces a housing crisis, with the federal government cutting its public housing budget by 98%. However, social movements and left-wing local authorities are working to address the deficit. Our correspondent, Brian Meir, reports.
In 14 years of Workers' Party rule, the Brazilian federal government spent billions of dollars on self-managed autonomous housing construction in partnership with working-class social movements. Since the 2016 coup, however, most of these projects have been paralyzed as the Bolsonaro administration cut its housing budget by 98%.
Our constitution says we have the right to housing, but in reality, we don't see it happening. The pandemic isn't just affecting housing. Groceries have gotten really expensive, and we squatted on vacant land because families are having to choose between eating or paying rent.
The housing crisis has caused left-wing mayors across the country to take matters into their own hands. After 150 families from the MLB social movement squatted on an empty lot in Diadema, São Paulo, the mayor's office announced it will close an illegal parking lot and build ownership-based housing for the families on it. In the meantime, it's providing 18 months of financial support to the social movement.
The end of the federal social housing program directly affected the social movement and the families that can no longer afford to pay rent. So we created a municipal program to support housing movements. We're going to strengthen the movements so they can support poor families.
Brazilian Workers' Party mayors and people's housing movements hope that they can work together to reduce Brazil's deficit of 6 million housing units. Brian Meir, Telesur, Diadema.
And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back. Chile, one of the countries with the highest vaccination rate against the coronavirus, began administering a fourth dose of vaccines to immunocompromised people on Monday amid a resurgence of infections due to the Omicron variant. The first stage of this second booster campaign is aimed at people over 12 years of age, including patients on dialysis, organ transplants, and cancer treatment, who received the previous dose more than 4 months ago. From February 7th, vaccination with the fourth dose will begin for all those over 55 years of age, and then move down in age. Meanwhile, experts have noted that another booster dose for the wider population is not necessary, while the World Health Organization has stressed the importance of people in all countries being vaccinated in order to end the pandemic. Iceland has begun vaccination against COVID-19 for children aged 5 to 11 years old. Around 33,000 children in this age group are eligible for vaccination against COVID-19, and some within the demographic have already been vaccinated. So far, only the Pfizer vaccine has been approved for use in those aged 15 and younger in Iceland. Meanwhile, the booster campaign continues for fully vaccinated adults who received their second dose 5 months or more ago, with the Pfizer, Moderna, and Janssen shots being administered. New restrictions for the unvaccinated came into force in Italy on Monday, preventing them from entering restaurants, gyms, swimming pools, theaters, cinemas, sports events, or public transport, with only those who recently recovered from COVID-19 exempt.
Problems we are facing today are due to the fact that they are unvaccinated people. Unvaccinated people have a higher chance of developing the disease and severe forms of the disease. Therefore, one of the aims of this press conference is to encourage all Italians who have not yet been vaccinated to go and do so. We want to be careful, very careful, but also try to minimize the economic and social effects, and above all, the effects on boys and girls who have been affected from a psychological and educational point of view more than others by the closures.
The Philippines reported more than 33,000 new COVID-19 infections on Monday, a new record daily spike. The confirmed cases is pushing the number in the Southeast Asian country to almost 3 million. The Department of Health said the positivity rate continued rising to record 46%. 145 more people died from COVID-19 complications, bringing the country's death toll over 52,000. Vince Dizon, the deputy chief implementer of the government's response against COVID-19, said the demand for COVID-19 tests surged, straining the country's laboratories. Authorities imposed hard lockdowns in several areas of the country. Ugandan children have returned to school after nearly 2 years. The country ended the world's longest school closure on Monday, ordering millions of students back to the classroom, nearly 2 years after in-person learning was suspended because of the coronavirus pandemic. Students poured through school gates that were shut in March 2020 when COVID-19 swept the globe, greeting teachers and friends after 83 weeks outside the classroom. All schools have implemented guidelines and standard operating procedures to ensure the safe return of students, and measures have been put in place to ensure those who don't comply to do so. The United Nations launched talks this Monday to help Sudan resolve its escalating political crisis, triggered by last year's military coup, which has seen ongoing protests and repression.
In fact, we are acting as facilitators. We have presented a project for facilitating talks between the Sudanese people and the Sudanese parties through us, which means the talks will be indirect, and that is why we have come to say that we are here to consult with you. If things progress well, we might be able to reach an agreement on certain points. We might reach a stage where we can say that we're ready to move to another phase. And the round table that the Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok spoke of when he stepped down is still available. We're here just facilitating.
Nigerian authorities said on Sunday that gunmen killed at least 200 people and displaced thousands in multiple raids in the northwest of the country over the last week. The Minister of Humanitarian Affairs described the past week's attacks in the northern Zamfara state as horrific and tragic. On Saturday, 4 residents reported that gunmen rampaged through Anka and Bukuyum districts over 2 days, killing at least 140 people as they shot at anyone in sight. Local authorities imposed highly restrictive measures for almost 3 months last year, shutting down telecoms, capping fuel sales and closing cattle markets in an attempt to weaken the armed groups known locally as bandits, but attacks have continued.
I never expected to see my relatives again. After we ran and left the village, I did not see them, but I have seen them now, thank God. Nobody told you about situation of our village, but I don't think there is anybody in that village now, including security forces.
And floods around South Africa's eastern coastal city of East London have killed at least 10 people and left hundreds homeless since the weekend. Cars were trying to drive through torrents of water that had submerged highways. Hundreds of homes had been washed away in the iron-roof informal settlements just outside the city. Scientists suspect that climate change is the cause of worsening floods and droughts along the country's eastern coastline, where the city of roughly 500,000 lives. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. Formal talks between Russia and the United States officials were held on Monday in the midst of escalating tensions. Russia told the United States that it had no plans to invade Ukraine, contrary to the repeated allegations voiced by Western powers and echoed in the mass media. After more than 7 hours of negotiations in the Swiss capital, the Russian and the U.S. negotiators both offered to keep talking, though it was no sign of a major breakthrough. The talks come as Moscow demands that Washington and its NATO allies stop the military encirclement of Russia and work to prevent a possible escalation of the conflict in neighboring Ukraine. Meanwhile, Washington continues to threaten more sanctions.
We explained to our colleagues that we have no plans, no intentions to attack Ukraine, and cannot have such. The conversation was difficult, long, very professional, in-depth and specific. We urge the United States to be as responsible as possible at this time. The risks associated with the further development of confrontation cannot be underestimated. The main issues are on hold, and we do not see the American side understand the imperative of resolving them in a way that suits us. These are attempts to put forward an ultimatum. These are attempts of blackmail and intimidation. I understand that apart from sanctions and blackmail, little is left in the arsenal of modern Western foreign policy.
The government of China indicated that it is willing to intensify cooperation with Kazakhstan to prevent a color revolution. The Chinese foreign minister expressed his firm support to the government of the Central Asian country to stop violence, prevent and avoid external intervention, as well as guarantee the security of the political systems of both countries. Chinese authorities also denounced the external forces that are pushing for greater conflict in Kazakhstan. Meanwhile, they expressed their full support for all national and international efforts to help authorities to put an end, as soon as possible, to the violent unrest that has claimed the lives of over 100 people. An explosion in eastern Afghanistan near the border with Pakistan on Monday killed 9 children and wounded 4, according to local authorities. A statement from the governor's office said the blast took place when a cart selling food items struck an old unexploded mortar shell in the eastern Nangarhar province. No other details were immediately available. The province is the headquarters of Taliban rivals, the Islamic State group, which has staged several attacks targeting Afghanistan's new rulers since the Taliban returned to power in mid-August. Afghanistan is among the countries with the most unexploded landmines following 20 years of Western-backed war and foreign occupation. Iran's foreign ministry said on Monday that efforts by all parties to revive the country's 2015 nuclear agreement with world powers had resulted in good progress during the talks in Vienna.
This progress is the result of the efforts made by all parties to reach a stable agreement. There has been good progress on all four issues of removing sanctions, nuclear issues, verification, and obtaining guarantees. We are seeking a reliable and stable deal. If the other party thinks an unstable and unreliable agreement is to their benefit, this is not what the Islamic Republic is after.
A court in Myanmar sentenced ouster leader Aung San Suu Kyi to another 4 years in prison on Monday in the latest of a series of trials. Suu Kyi was convicted for the illegal possession of import of walkie-talkies and breaking COVID-19 rules. She was the first convicted in December and given a reduced jail sentence of 2 years. The former leader has been detained since a military coup last February and faces about a dozen charges, all of which he denies. The charges in the latest case stem from when soldiers searched her house on the day of the coup by forces led by Army Chief General Min Aung Hlaing. The devices they say they discovered are presumed to have been used by her security guards, resulting in a conviction widely viewed as no more than a tactic to justify detaining him. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesdorenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For Telesdore English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.